Alright, imagine a scene in South Carolina, August 16th, 1780. It's a balmy, muggy morning, and we're at the Battle of Camden, one of the most lopsided clashes in the American Revolution. Enter General Horatio Gates, the guy who, despite his big win at Saratoga, somehow ended up over his head here in the South. He rolls into Camden convinced he's going to lead another grand victory. But here's the twist. This is going to be one of the most embarrassing flops in the Continental Army's history. It's the crack of dawn, and Gates is confidently positioning his troops for what he thinks is about to be a decisive victory. But then, from out of the dense foggy mist of South Carolina's swamps, the British troops under General Charles Cornwallis appear. With every step they take, they're about to show Gates and his men what happens when optimism meets disaster. So here's the thing. Gates wasn't exactly South Carolina's knight in shining armor. He was up against General Cornwallis, a seasoned British officer who actually knew what he was doing in battle. Gates, on the other hand, had arrived with way too much confidence and not enough planning. He'd been hyped up as the hero of Saratoga, but by now, his reputation was probably a little bit inflated, like when someone's one good play in high school sports makes them think they're a pro. He had pushed his exhausted men, half of whom were untrained and underfed, on a brutal forced march through swampy territory just to make it to Camden. These weren't top-tier soldiers, they were ragtag, made up of around 3,000 hungry and tired men, half of whom were untrained militia. To make it worse, Gates didn't even bother scouting the terrain. He basically rode into the battle blind. Gates sets up his line, but right from the start, it's clear things are about to go south, and fast. Gates, in a move that could only be described as baffling, places his least trained troops, the militia, on the left flank. Facing them, the best British troops Cornwallis had. Cornwallis sees the setup and thinks, oh, this is just too easy. The battle kicks off, and almost instantly the British break through the militia's line. The American militia, understandably, freaks out, seeing these well-trained redcoats charging toward them with bayonets ready. They scatter. And when I say scatter, I mean it was the kind of panicked fleeing you'd see if someone set off a firecracker in a crowd. Gates watches in horror as half his army literally disappears into the woods. It's total chaos. And to add salt to the wound, Gates, the general, the leader, the so-called hero of Saratoga, is one of the first to run. Now it's down to the Continental Army's regular troops to hold the line, but without the militia to back them up, it's like trying to hold back a tidal wave with a sandcastle. The British close in, and the Americans get absolutely pounded. For hours they try to stand their ground, but Cornwallis's forces push through with brutal efficiency. The field is littered with wounded and defeated soldiers, and the American troops are forced to retreat in one of the most humiliating losses they've faced. And if that wasn't enough, Gates's once mighty reputation is basically obliterated. The battle that was supposed to bring him glory turns into a disaster, and he ends up fleeing the scene faster than anyone else. By the end of it, Gates is around 60 miles away from Camden, having made his escape while his men were left to deal with the aftermath. After Camden, Gates's career takes a nosedive. The Continental Congress pulls him from command, and his reputation as a hero is forever tarnished. Meanwhile, Cornwallis and his British troops tighten their grip on the South, feeling pretty unbeatable. The impact of the Battle of Camden, well, it wasn't just a loss, it was a wake-up call. From that point on, the Continental Army knew they couldn't rely on questionable leaders or hastily assembled militias. They needed solid strategic planning and disciplined troops to have any shot at winning the war. In the end, Camden was a brutal lesson in what happens when overconfidence meets unpreparedness. And Gates, he went from hero to zero in record time, all thanks to one chaotic, catastrophic day in the swamps of South Carolina.